Do you know the specific kind of dread that comes from seeing your own last name on a file you are ethically forbidden to touch? I thought I had outrun the title of family failure years ago. Then, one late night in January, my niece's essay landed on my desk. She was not asking for my pity, she was opening a trap door. My name is Stella Perry, and I can pinpoint the exact second I became a ghost in my own house. It was not a gradual fading away, nor was it a quiet drift into irrelevance. It was a violent, deliberate erasure that happened over a plate of roasted turkey and cranberry sauce that had come from a can. It was Thanksgiving. 5 years ago, the setting was our family home in a suburb just outside of Chicago. A place where the lawns were manicured to within a millimeter of their lives, and the neighbors knew your credit score before they knew your first name. The house was a sprawling colonial revival that my father, Martin Perry, liked to call his castle. It was always cold inside. My mother, Evelyn, kept the thermostat at a rigid 68 degrees because she believed it preserved the upholstery and kept the guests alert. We were seated in the formal dining room, a space we used exactly twice a year. The chandelier above us was crystal, refracting the dim light into sharp, accusing daggers on the tablecloth. I remember looking at my reflection in the polished silver of my spoon and thinking that the warped, distorted face staring back at me looked more like the real me than the person sitting in the chair. I was 22 years old. I was currently enrolled in a fast-track pre-law program at a private university that cost more per semester than most people earned in 2 years. It was a prestigious path. It was a secure path. It was also a path that made me want to drive my car into the median every time I merged onto the highway to get to campus. The air in the room was thick with the smell of sage and the heavier, more suffocating scent of expectation. My sister, Lauren, sat across from me. Lauren was 26, already a junior associate at a high-powered consulting firm, already married to a man who wore sweaters tied around his shoulders, already perfect. She was cutting her turkey into geometric squares, her knife scraping against the china with a sound that set my teeth on edge. "So," my father said, wiping the corner of his mouth with a linen napkin, "how are the torts coming along? Stella? I ran into Dean Miller at the club on Saturday. He says you have not registered for the winter clinic yet." This was it, the moment I had been rehearsing in the shower for 3 weeks. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, but I forced my hands to remain still in my lap. I took a breath. It felt like inhaling broken glass. "I am not registering for the clinic, Dad," I said. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the cavernous room. So I cleared my throat and said it again, louder. "I am not registering for the clinic because I am not going back next semester." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that sucks the oxygen out of a room. My mother's fork hovered halfway to her mouth. Lauren stopped chewing. My father slowly lowered his napkin to the table, his eyes narrowing as if he were trying to read a menu in a dark restaurant. "Excuse me?" Martin asked. His voice was dangerously soft. "I am withdrawing," I said. I tried to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I realize that I do not want to be a lawyer. I never wanted to be a lawyer. That was your dream, not mine. So, I found a job." "A job," Lauren repeated. It was the first time she had spoken in 20 minutes. The word tasted sour in her mouth. "Yes," I said, turning to look at her. "I have accepted a position as a junior copy editor at Juniper Row Media. It is in Philadelphia. I start in 2 weeks." "Juniper Row?" my father scoffed. "Sounds like a gardening center. What sort of salary does a junior copy editor command these days? Enough to pay for a cardboard box to live in?" $38,000 a year, I said. "And benefits." $38,000, my father repeated. He laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Stella, your tuition last year was $55,000. You are trading a future where you could be billing $600 an hour for a paycheck that barely covers the gas bill for this house. You are throwing away an investment." "I am not an investment," I snapped. "I am a person, and I am suffocating here. I am suffocating in that school. I want to write. I want to work with stories. I want to live my own life, even if it is small, even if it is messy. It is not about what you want, my mother interjected. Her voice was high and thin, the voice of a woman who had spent 30 years smoothing over cracks in the foundation. Stella, honey, think about what you are saying. You are tired. Exams are coming up. You are just stressed. Why don't we just say you are taking a break? We can talk to the dean. We can fix this. I don't want to fix it. Mom, I said. I want to leave it. I have already signed the lease on a studio apartment. I have enough savings to get me there. I am not asking for permission. I am just telling you so you don't worry when I'm gone. Worry? Lauren let out a short, sharp laugh. She took a sip of her wine, her eyes glittering over the rim of the glass. Oh, Stella, you are adorable. You think we are going to worry? We are not worried. We are embarrassed. Lauren, my mother warned, but it was a weak protest. No, let's be honest, Lauren said, setting her glass down. She leaned forward, the candlelight catching the diamond studs in her ears. You are quitting because you can't hack it. You have always been soft. Stella, you couldn't handle the pressure in high school, and now you are folding at the first sign of real work in law school. You are running away to play writer in some grimy city because you are afraid of the real world. I am not afraid, I said, though my hands were shaking now. I am choosing to be happy. Happiness is for people who can afford it. My father slammed his hand on the table. The silverware jumped. You think you can just walk away from this family's legacy? You think you can spit in the face of everything I have built, everything I have paid for? I am not spitting on anything, I said. I am just changing direction. You are quitting, he roared. His face was flushing a deep, unhealthy red. You are a quitter, and in this house, we do not tolerate quitters. I am not asking for your money, I said, my voice rising to match his. I am not asking for your help. I will do it on my own. You won't last 6 months, Lauren said. She picked up her knife again, slicing into her turkey with surgical precision. You will be back here, crying in the foyer, begging Dad to pay off your credit cards before the summer starts. You have no spine, Stella. You never have. That is enough. Lauren, I said, standing up. My legs felt weak, but I locked my knees. I am leaving. I am packing my car tonight, and I'm leaving in the morning. If you walk out that door, my father said, his voice dropping to a low, cold growl. Do not expect to come back. I am cutting you off. The bank accounts, the insurance, the car payments, all of it. Gone. You want to be independent? Fine. Go be poor. But do not think for 1 second that you can come crawling back when you realize you are nothing without the Perry name. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me, the man who had checked my report cards before he checked to see if I had a fever. I realized then that he did not see a daughter. He saw a defective product. I won't come back, I said. My mother looked down at her plate, refusing to meet my eyes. She was choosing her side. She always chose the side that paid the mortgage. Go on then, Lauren said. She didn't look up from her food. She just smirked, a small, tight curving of her lips that made my stomach turn. She speared a piece of meat and held it up, inspecting it. Go on. Stella, go prove us right. I turned to leave the room. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor. I felt a strange sensation, like a heavy coat sliding off my shoulders. It was terror, yes, but beneath the terror was something that felt remarkably like oxygen. But then, Lauren spoke again. She didn't shout it. She didn't say it with rage. She said it with a casual, dismissive finality, as if she were reading a label on a jar. Family failure. The words hung in the air, suspended in the silence of the room. It wasn't just an insult. It was a verdict. It was a stamp of rejection pressed into my forehead. My father grunted in agreement. Family failure, he muttered. That is exactly what this is. I did not turn back. I knew that if I turned back, I would scream, or I would cry. and I refused to give them the satisfaction of either. I walked out of the dining room, through the foyer with its marble floors and towering vase of dried reeds. I climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom, the room that still had the wallpaper I had picked out when I was 12. I packed quickly. I didn't take everything. I only took what I could carry. What I needed: my laptop, my journals, the few clothes that felt like me and not the costumes my mother bought. I left the pearls. I left the expensive handbags. I left the pre-law textbooks on the desk. 20 minutes later, I was walking back down the stairs with a duffel bag over my shoulder. The house was quiet again. I could hear the clinking of silverware from the dining room. They had resumed eating. They hadn't even lost their appetites. I walked to the front door, my hand reaching for the brass handle. This was it. The end of Stella Perry. The daughter. The beginning of Stella Perry. The stranger. But as I paused there, adjusting the strap of my bag, I heard voices drifting from the dining room. The door was slightly ajar. "She is actually going," my father said. He sounded tired, but not sad. He sounded like a man who had just dealt with a difficult employee. "It is for the best, Dad," Lauren said. Her voice was lower now, conspiratorial. She was never going to make it. She would have cracked during the bar exam anyway. This saves us the embarrassment later. "I suppose," my father sighed. "It is just a waste, all that tuition." "It is not a waste if we control the narrative," Lauren said. I could hear the smile in her voice. "I already told people she was taking a medical leave, mental health reasons. It makes us look sympathetic." I froze. My hand tightened on the doorknob. Mental health reasons? "You are smart, Lauren," my father said, always thinking ahead. "And Dad?" Lauren's voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible, but in the silence of that house, it carried like a gunshot. "Did you send the email to the dean's office?" "Yes," my father replied. "Sent it this afternoon, before dinner. It is done." "Good," Lauren whispered. "So even if she changes her mind tomorrow, she can't go back. She has to leave. We made sure of that." The blood drained from my face. I stood there, paralyzed by the sudden, horrific clarity of it all. They hadn't just reacted to my announcement. They had anticipated it. Or worse, they had engineered the finality of it. My father had withdrawn me from the university before I had even told him I was leaving. They weren't just letting me go. They were evicting me. I realized then that the fight at the table had been a performance. Lauren had known. My father had known. The only person who hadn't known the script was me. The family failure label wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a pre-printed tag they had been waiting to slap on me the moment I stepped out of line. I didn't storm back in. I didn't confront them. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it would be useless. They had already rewritten history. To go back in there would only be to step into a trap they had already sprung. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cold November night. The wind bit at my cheeks, sharp and clean. I walked to my beat-up sedan, threw my bag in the passenger seat, and turned the key as I drove away. Watching the lighted windows of my childhood home shrink in the rearview mirror, I didn't feel the grief I expected. I felt a cold, hard knot forming in the center of my chest. They thought they had discarded me. They thought they had written me out of the story. But as I merged onto the interstate, heading east toward a city I didn't know and a life I couldn't afford, I made a promise to the rearview mirror. I was not a failure. I was a loose end. And loose ends have a nasty habit of tripping people up when they least expect it. The city I moved to was less of a fresh start and more of a cold shower. Philadelphia in late November was a palette of grays. Gray sky, gray pavement, gray slush that splashed up onto my shins every time a bus roared past. I had traded the manicured silence of the suburbs for a sonic landscape that never actually slept. My apartment was a fourth-floor walk-up in a neighborhood that real estate agents optimistically described as up-and-coming, which in reality meant I had a view of a check-cashing place and a bodega that sold milk with an expiration date that was always a suggestion rather than a rule. The rent was $750 a month. For that price, I got 300 square feet of living space, a radiator that banged like a trapped pipe fitter every morning at 4 o'clock, and walls so thin I could hear my neighbor, a heavy-footed man named Mr. Henderson, sneeze. I knew when Mr. Henderson watched the news. I knew when he made toast. In a way, he was the closest thing to family I had, simply because he was the only consistent presence in my life. Separated only by a layer of drywall and cheap plaster, Juniper Row Media was located in a converted warehouse in the Fishtown district. The name sounded rustic and charming. The reality was a fluorescent-lit, open-plan office that smelled permanently of stale coffee and ozone. It was a content farm. We did not write literature. We wrote listicles about celebrity skincare routines and 10 ways to tell he is cheating. My job title was junior copy editor, but my actual job description was to fix the grammar of 22-year-old interns who thought semicolons were a matter of opinion and to ensure that our headlines were clickable enough to satisfy the algorithm gods. My boss was a woman named Karen, not a stereotype, but literally named Karen, who wore noise-canceling headphones 18 hours a day and communicated exclusively through passive-aggressive Slack messages. "Stella, this headline lacks urgency," she would type from 3 feet away. "Make the user feel like they will die if they do not click." It was grueling. It was mindless. And I loved it. I loved it because for the first time in my life, the stakes were delightfully, hilariously low. If I messed up a headline about avocado toast, nobody went to jail, nobody lost their family fortune, the world kept spinning. But amidst the clickbait, I started to learn the mechanics of a story. I learned that people do not read for information. They read for validation. They read to see themselves reflected in the text, even in a garbage article about zodiac signs. People were looking for a narrative that explained their own chaos. I began to see the skeleton beneath the skin of every paragraph I touched. But $38,000 a year in a major city does not go far. After taxes, rent, student loan payments that I was now solely responsible for, and the exorbitant cost of heating a drafty apartment, I was left with a disposable income of roughly $40 a week. I learned to cook. Or rather, I learned to assemble heat. Rice and beans became my religion. I learned which grocery stores marked down their produce on Tuesday nights. I walked everywhere because the subway fare was a luxury I rationed for rainy days. To bridge the gap, I started freelancing. I put up a profile on a few gig sites offering to edit resumes and cover letters. At first, it was just a trickle, a few dollars here and there to fix a typo in a cover letter for a retail job. But then, I started getting requests from college students. Not the rich kids from my old life who hired $10,000 consultants. These were kids from state schools, kids from community colleges, kids who were the first in their families to apply to anything. They sent me essays that were messy, raw, and grammatically disastrous, but they had heart. They had pulse. One night, I was working on an essay for a boy named Mateo from the Bronx. He was trying to get a scholarship to an engineering program. His draft was a chaotic list of his grades and awards. It was boring. It was exactly what he thought they wanted to hear. I messaged him. "Mateo, tell me about the time you fixed something that was broken." He wrote back about fixing his grandmother's radiator with a paperclip and some chewing gum during a blizzard. It was brilliant. It was human. We reworked the essay around that story. He got the scholarship. When he emailed me to tell me, typing in all caps with a dozen exclamation points, I felt a spark of satisfaction that no grade in law school had ever given me. I was good at this. I could look at a pile of disjointed facts and find the golden thread that tied them together. While I was building this new, scrap metal life, the silence from Illinois was deafening. My father stuck to his word. The financial cutoff was total. My phone plan was canceled within 24 hours of me leaving the driveway. I had to get a prepaid burner phone until I could afford a contract. My mother called, but her calls were strategic strikes. She would call on Sunday afternoons, a time she knew I would be home doing laundry. "Hello, Stella," she would say, her voice tight and airy, as if she were talking to a distant acquaintance at a cocktail party. I just wanted to make sure you are still alive. I am fine, Mom, I would say, holding the phone against my shoulder while I folded cheap towels. I am working. I am paying my bills. That is nice, she would reply, breezing past my accomplishments as if they were invisible. Lauren was just promoted to senior engagement manager. They are flying her to London next week. First class. She is looking at buying a vacation home in the Hamptons. Just a small cottage. Barely $2 million. Good for her, I would say. She worries about you, you know. My mother would lie. We all do. It is just so hard for your father to understand why you would choose this. Choose what? Mom? Paying my own rent? Being happy? Why you would choose to be difficult, she corrected. Anyway, I have to go. The caterers are coming for the charity gala tonight. Try to eat a vegetable, Stella. And then the line would go dead. Lauren only called once. It was 3 months in, on a Tuesday night when I was eating instant noodles out of a mug and editing a resume for a nurse in Ohio. Hello? Sister? Lauren's voice was smooth, devoid of the static that usually plagued my cheap phone connection. Lauren, I said, to what do I owe the pleasure? I was just curious, she said. I have a bet going with Dad. He says you will break by Easter. I put my money on the 4th of July. I just wanted to see who is winning. You can tell Dad to keep his money, I said, staring at the peeling paint on my windowsill. I am not coming back. Oh, please, Lauren laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. You are living in squalor. Stella, I looked up your address. It is a slum. How long do you think you can play starving artist before you realize you are just starving? You were bred for comfort. You are not a survivor. You are a pet that got let out of the yard. I am working, I said. I am building something. You are a copy editor, she sneered. You fix commas for a living. I just closed a deal that is worth more than your entire company. Do yourself a favor. Call Dad. Apologize. Tell him you had a nervous breakdown. He will take you back. He needs a project. I heard you, I said. My voice was steady, surprising even me. I heard what you said to him in the dining room, about the email to the dean, about controlling the narrative. There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence. I don't know what you are talking about, Lauren said, but the smoothness was gone. Her tone was sharp, defensive. You were hysterical. You were hearing things. I wasn't hysterical, I said, and I'm not coming back. Enjoy London. I hung up before she could respond. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from rage. That was the night I bought the notebook. It was a simple black composition book, the kind you buy for 99 cents at the drugstore. I sat down at my wobbly kitchen table and wrote the truth on the first page. I didn't write about my feelings. I didn't write poetry about my loneliness. I wrote down facts. I wrote down the date and time of the Thanksgiving dinner. I wrote down the exact phrasing Lauren used. Family failure. I wrote down the snippet of conversation I overheard about the email sent to the dean. I wrote down the dates of every phone call, every passive-aggressive comment from my mother. I wasn't writing a diary. I was building a dossier. I didn't know what I would use it for, or if I would ever use it at all. But I knew that in my family, history was fluid. They would rewrite the past to suit their image. My memory was the only evidence I had that I wasn't crazy, at work. I found an unlikely ally. His name was Elias. He was 62 years old. A chain-smoking editor who had once been a serious journalist for a major newspaper before the industry imploded and washed him up at Juniper Row. He had a face like a crumpled road map and eyes that had seen everything. We would take our lunch breaks together on the loading dock behind the warehouse, sitting on milk crates while he smoked, and I drank lukewarm coffee. You have got a chip on your shoulder the size of a Buick, kid, Elias told me one afternoon, exhaling a cloud of gray smoke. I have a complicated family, I said, picking at a loose thread on my sweater. We all do. Elias grunted. My brother hasn't spoken to me since 1998. He thinks I am a communist because I drive a Volvo. My family thinks I am a failure, I said. They actually call me that. It is their nickname for me. Elias looked at me, his eyes narrowing. And do you believe them? No, I said, but I want to prove them wrong. I want to show them I am better than them. Elias chuckled, a sound like gravel in a blender. That is a trap. Stella, if you live your life trying to prove something to people who don't want to see it, you are still living on their terms. You are still dancing to their tune. So what do I do? I asked. Just forgive them? Hell no, Elias said, stamping out his cigarette. Forgiveness is overrated. Indifference is the goal. But until you get there, you don't win by arguing. You don't win by shouting. You win by being undeniable. You build a life so solid, so real, that their version of you simply ceases to exist. You don't ask for their respect. You make it impossible for them to ignore your competence. Make it impossible for them to ignore your competence. I took that advice and wore it like armor. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I stopped checking my sister's LinkedIn profile. I threw myself into my work. I started taking on harder edits. I started rewriting entire articles instead of just fixing the grammar. I started charging more for my freelance work. I was lonely. God, I was lonely. There were nights when the silence of my apartment felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I spent Christmas alone, eating takeout Chinese food and watching old movies, trying to ignore the ache of knowing that somewhere in Illinois, there was a fire in the fireplace and a tree covered in heirloom ornaments, and nobody had set a place for me. But I survived. I paid my rent on the 1st of every month. I bought a winter coat with my own money. I was tired. I was broke. But I was free. Then, on a Tuesday in late January, exactly 2 months after I left, I received an email on my personal account. It was from a generic address, something like user12984protonmail.com, no subject line. I opened it, expecting spam or a phishing attempt. There was only one line of text. They do not call you a failure because they think you are weak. They call you a failure because they are terrified that you are the only one of them who is actually strong enough to be different. I stared at the screen. The blue light reflecting in my eyes. I read the sentence 5 times. I checked the IP address, but it was routed through a VPN. There was no signature, no clue. But as I sat there in my cold, noisy apartment, listening to Mr. Henderson sneeze next door, I felt a strange warmth spread through my chest. Someone was watching. Someone knew. And for the first time since Thanksgiving, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt like a threat. The climb was not a rocket launch. It was a slow, agonizing crawl up a mountain composed entirely of loose gravel. If my first few months in Philadelphia were about survival, the next 4 years were about reconstruction. I stopped looking at my life as a wreckage site and started viewing it as a foundation. It took 18 months to claw my way out of the junior copy editor pit at Juniper Row Media. I did not get promoted because I was the fastest worker, or because I brought donuts to the morning meetings. I got promoted because I stopped fixing grammar and started fixing souls. I remember the turning point clearly. One of our freelancers, a travel writer who usually churned out fluff pieces about resorts in Cabo, sent in a draft about a hiking trip in Patagonia. It was technically a disaster. The sentence structure was repetitive, and he had used the word breathtaking 7 times in 3 paragraphs. But buried in the middle of the piece was a single, jagged sentence about how the silence of the mountains reminded him of his late wife's voice. Most editors would have cut it. It did not fit the breezy, commercial tone of the website. I did the opposite. I called him. I told him to cut the descriptions of the hotel amenities and write about the silence. I told him to make the silence the main character. The piece went viral, not just clickbait viral, but genuinely shared. People commented that they had cried reading it on their commute. 2 weeks later, Karen called me into her office. She looked at me over the rim of her noise-canceling headphones and told me I was now a development editor. My salary bumped up to $45,000 a year. It was barely a living wage in the city, but it felt like a fortune. I used the extra money to buy time. I realized that if I wanted to prove my family wrong, or rather, if I wanted to prove myself right, I needed credentials. I could not just be the girl who ran away. I had to be the woman who arrived somewhere else. I enrolled in the Marston Collegiate Program. It was a night school, the kind of place where the vending machines were the primary food source and the fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. I finished my undergraduate degree there, taking classes from 6 in the evening until 9 at night, 3 days a week. My classmates were not legacy kids in cashmere sweaters. They were single mothers, veterans, and exhausted shift workers. We did not discuss ski trips. We discussed how to stay awake long enough to finish a thesis on Victorian literature. On the weekends, I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started opening doors. I rented a small community room at the local library for $20 a Saturday. I put up flyers in coffee shops and high schools. Free writing workshop. Find your voice. No grades. No judgment. The first week, 2 people showed up. One was a retiree who wanted to write a memoir about his cat. The other was a terrified 16-year-old girl named Annika who had failed English twice. I sat with Anika for 3 hours. I let her talk. I realized she did not hate writing. She hated the performative nature of academic writing. She hated trying to sound smart. I told her to write like she spoke. I told her that her broken English, influenced by the 3 languages spoken in her home, was not a defect. It was a texture. By the 6th month, the room was full. We had 20 students every Saturday. We ran out of chairs. I spent my meager salary on bagels and orange juice. These kids were hungry, not just for food, but for permission. They had spent their entire lives being told that their stories were too messy, too foreign, or too simple for the academic world. I taught them that the only thing that made a story valuable was its truth. One afternoon, a boy named Marcus, who was trying to get into a state college, looked at me after I praised his opening paragraph. He had tears in his eyes. He said that nobody had ever looked at his life and called it art before. He said he felt seen. That word lodged in my chest. Seen. It was the exact opposite of what happened at that Thanksgiving table. My family had looked at me and seen a failure. I looked at these kids and saw potential. I realized then that my failure was actually my superpower. I could see the cracks in people because I was living in one. I graduated from Marston with honors, but I did not stop. I applied for a scholarship to the Bellington Institute of Letters. It was a small, intense, and highly respected graduate program for creative nonfiction. When I got the acceptance letter, along with a full tuition grant, I did not call my parents. I did not post it on social media. I taped it to my refrigerator next to a takeout menu and went to work. The next 2 years were a blur of caffeine and adrenaline. I was working full-time at Juniper Row during the day, running the workshops on Saturdays, and attending graduate seminars at night. I slept an average of 4 hours a night. I lost weight. My eyes developed permanent dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. I looked like a phantom, but I felt solid. I was forging myself in the fire of my own exhaustion. For my master's thesis, I did not write a novel. I wrote a collection of essays titled The Scenic Route. It was a study of non-linear lives. I interviewed the people I had met in night school, the kids from my workshops, the people who had fallen off the standard track and found their way through the underbrush. I wrote about the dignity of the detour. I included one essay about a girl who walked away from a Thanksgiving dinner. I did not use real names. I did not mention the specific university, but I captured the coldness of the dining room and the liberation of the winter wind. The book was published by a small academic press. It did not make the bestseller list. It did not make me rich. My royalty check was for $412, but it found its way into the hands of the people who mattered. High school guidance counselors started quoting it. College admissions officers passed it around. I started getting emails from strangers who told me that my book had given them permission to breathe. I began receiving invitations to speak. At first, it was just local libraries. Then, high schools started calling. I remember standing on the stage of a magnet high school in New Jersey. The auditorium was packed with 500 teenagers. All of them stressed. All of them terrified of not getting into the right college. They looked like deer caught in the headlights of their own futures. "I am not here to tell you how to get into Harvard," I told them into the microphone. "I am here to tell you that if you do not get into Harvard, you will not die. I am here to tell you that the most interesting people I know did not take a straight line to get where they are. Your worth is not a number on a piece of paper. Your worth is in your resilience." The applause that day was not polite. It was raucous. It was the sound of a pressure valve being released after the talk. A man approached me. He was wearing a tweed jacket that looked expensive but worn. He introduced himself as Dr. Silas Vance. I knew the name. He was a legendary figure in the world of higher education, a former dean who had written extensively on the ethics of admissions. "That was a dangerous speech. Ms. Perry," he said, smiling, "you are telling them that the system is broken." "It is broken," I said. "I know," he replied. "That is why I want to hire you." We went for coffee. Dr. Vance told me he was consulting for Arborgate University. My stomach dropped. Arborgate was not just a university. It was an institution. It was older than the country itself. It was the kind of place my father worshipped. The kind of place Lauren would kill to have on her resume. It was the pinnacle of the track I had abandoned. "Arborgate is looking for a new director of undergraduate admissions review." "Doctor," Vance said, stirring sugar into his tea. "They are under pressure. The world is changing. People are tired of the polished, perfect, robotic applicants. They want authenticity. They want someone who can read a file and see the human being, not just the test scores. I told the provost about you. I gave him your book." "Me?" I laughed. It was a sharp, incredulous sound. "Dr. Vance, I am a dropout. I am a copy editor. I went to night school. I am everything Arborgate usually filters out." "Exactly," he said. He leaned forward. "We have enough people who know how to maintain the gate. We need someone who knows how to open it for the right people. We need someone who understands that a straight line is not the only geometry of success." I hesitated. The thought of walking into the halls of Arborgate felt like a betrayal of the life I had built. It felt like stepping back into the world that had rejected me. Why would I want to be part of the machine that had tried to crush me? "I can't," I said. "I am not one of them. You don't have to be one of them." "Doctor," Vance said softly, "you can be the one who changes them. You can leave the system, Stella, and let it keep grinding kids into dust, or you can enter it and change the criteria. Power is not just about having the title. It is about who you let in the room." I went home and stared at my wall. I looked at the Truth Dossier notebook that had sat on my shelf for years. I thought about Anika. I thought about Mateo. I thought about the thousands of kids who were told they were failures because they didn't fit a mold manufactured by people like my father. If I took this job, it wouldn't be for the prestige. It wouldn't be for the salary. Though the number Doctor Vance mentioned was higher than I could have imagined, it would be an infiltration. I realized that revenge wasn't just about proving my family wrong. That was petty. That was small. True revenge was dismantling the weapon they had used against me. They had used the concept of merit as a cudgel to beat me down. I could take that cudgel and turn it into a tool. I could redefine what merit meant. I went through the interview process. It was grueling. I sat before panels of gray-haired men who looked at my resume with skepticism. I answered their questions not with deference, but with the confidence of someone who had nothing to lose. When they asked me about my untraditional educational background, I did not apologize. I told them that my background gave me a lens they lacked. I told them I could spot a manufactured essay from a mile away, because I knew exactly what fear looked like on a page. I got the call 3 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday in April, almost 5 years after I had walked out of my father's house. I sat in a mahogany-paneled office at Arborgate University. The human resources director pushed a heavy stack of papers across the desk toward me. "Welcome to the team, Ms. Perry," she said. "We are excited to see what you will do." I picked up the pen. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. I signed my name at the bottom of the contract, Stella Perry. Then my eyes drifted up to the top of the page, where my new title was printed in bold. Serif font, Director of Undergraduate Admissions Review. I stared at the words. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. The family failure was now the gatekeeper. The person who had been told she wasn't good enough was now the person who would decide who was. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was dry, raspy, and dark. It was the sound of the universe winking at a joke that had taken half a decade to reach its punchline. "Is everything all right?" the HR director asked, looking concerned. "Yes," I said, capping the pen with a satisfying click. "Everything is perfect. Life just has a very dark sense of humor." Arborgate University in admissions season was not an educational institution. It was a high-stakes commodities trading floor. Only the commodities were 17-year-old humans, and the currency was prestige. When I stepped into the role of Director of Undergraduate Admissions Review, the first thing that hit me was the sheer, crushing volume of desire. We received 52,000 applications for a freshman class of barely 2,000 students. Do the math. That is an acceptance rate of less than 4%. It was a statistical slaughterhouse, the reading room, where my team spent 12 hours a day. Smelled perpetually of dry erase markers and stress. The walls were covered in projected dashboards tracking demographics, yield rates, and regional spreads. My job was not to be the bleeding heart. My job was to be the forensic accountant of potential. I walked into this machine with a very specific agenda. I called it the Detour Pilot, though on the official books it was listed as the Holistic Review Expansion for Nonlinear Trajectories. It was a mouthful, designed to be boring enough that the Board of Trustees would ignore it, but potent enough to change lives. The premise was simple. We were going to stop penalizing gaps. We were going to stop looking at a year spent flipping burgers or caring for a sick parent as lost time and start viewing it as character acquisition. Naturally, the old guard hated it. The face of the old guard was Arthur Pendleton, a senior associate dean who wore bow ties without a hint of irony and believed that the SAT score was a direct measurement of a person's soul. "You are diluting the brand, Stella," Arthur told me during a strategy meeting in late October. We were sitting around a glass table that probably cost more than my first year's salary at Juniper Row. Arborgate is a finishing school for the elite intellect. We are not a rehabilitation center for people who could not figure out their path at 18. "We are not rehabilitating anyone, Arthur," I replied, projecting a slide onto the wall. "We are correcting a market inefficiency. Look at the data. Students who enter with perfect scores and linear paths, prep school to Ivy League track, have a dropout rate of 6% due to burnout by junior year. Now look at the transfers. Look at the veterans. Look at the students who worked full-time before applying. Their retention rate is 98%. They do not burn out because they already know what the real world looks like. They are not here to party. They are here to work." Arthur frowned at the numbers. He hated data that contradicted his worldview. "It is risky," he grumbled. "It looks desperate." "It looks like leadership," I said, closing the laptop. "And the provost approved the pilot. So, unless you want to argue with him, I suggest we start reading." And we did read. God, we read. My reputation in the department grew quickly, not because I was nice, but because I was terrifyingly accurate. I had spent years editing bad writing, which meant I had developed a sixth sense for bullshit. I could smell a manufactured essay from 3 paragraphs away. I taught my team to look for the ghost in the machine. That was what I called the presence of a hired admissions consultant. Listen to the voice. I told my team during a training session, if a 17-year-old boy from a rural public school sounds like a 45-year-old New Yorker writing for the New Yorker, that is a red flag. Teenagers are messy. They use passive voice. They over-explain. If the essay is too polished, if the narrative arc is too perfect, check the metadata. Check the teacher recommendations. See if the voice matches. I became a hunter. I wasn't looking for reasons to reject kids. I was looking for the truth. I wanted the kid who wrote about failing a math test because he was working the night shift, not the kid who wrote a performative essay about how a service trip to Peru opened his eyes to poverty. Written while staying in a 5-star hotel. My right hand in this war was Malcolm Reyes. Malcolm was my deputy director, a man who dressed in sharp, monochromatic suits and had a mind like a steel trap. He had grown up in Oakland and had clawed his way into academia with the same scrappy desperation I had. We didn't need to speak in full sentences to understand each other. "Take a look at this one," Malcolm said one afternoon, sliding a digital tablet across my desk. "Applicant number 4920, legally blind musician, essays are poetic, grades are stellar." I picked up the tablet and read the first paragraph. Then I scrolled down to the extracurriculars. Then I checked the alumni interview notes. "It is fake," I said, sliding the tablet back. "Tell me why," Malcolm said, leaning back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. He knew. He just wanted to see if I caught it. "The vocabulary drift," I said. "The personal statement uses British spellings of words like honor and center. The supplemental essays use American spellings. The interview notes say the kid is shy and struggles to articulate his passion. This essay was written by a professional, probably one educated at Oxford or Cambridge. The kid didn't write a word of it." "Denied," Malcolm said, tapping the screen. "That is the third one today from that same zip code." "Rich parents panic buying," I said, rubbing my temples. "It is going to get worse." The pressure was not just internal. Outside the walls of Arborgate, the world was watching. There were rumors swirling in the press, whispers of a scandal brewing at other top-tier universities, stories of wealthy families buying their way in through side doors, bribing coaches, or faking disabilities. It hadn't hit Arborgate yet, but the atmosphere was tense. The board was terrified of a subpoena. I used that fear. I implemented a new protocol. The 2-pair rule. No application flagged as special interest or development case, that means big donors, gets approved without 2 independent reviews and a signature from me or Malcolm. I announced to the staff, if a dean wants a donor's kid in, they have to put it in writing. No more handshake deals, no more post-it notes on files. We create a paper trail for everything. It made me unpopular with the fundraising department. They looked at me like I was setting money on fire. But I didn't care. I was building a fortress. It was in the middle of this siege warfare that the phone rang. It was a Thursday afternoon. The sky outside was a bruising purple, threatening snow. I saw the area code on my cell phone and froze. It was the Illinois landline, my parents' house. I debated letting it go to voicemail. I was a director at a major university. I commanded a staff of 30 people. I controlled the fate of thousands, and yet, looking at that number, I felt my stomach contract into a hard, cold knot. I answered it. "This is Stella." "Stella." My mother's voice came through. It wasn't warm. It was breathless, the way she always sounded when she was trying to execute a social maneuver. "I am glad I caught you. I know you are terribly busy with your paperwork. It is admission season." "Mom," I said, swiveling my chair to look out the window. "I am working 16-hour days. What is wrong? Is Dad okay?" "Oh, Martin is fine. He is playing golf in Florida next week," she said. "I was just calling because, well, Lauren is just so swamped. You know how it is. She is managing 3 mergers right now. She barely has time to sleep." "Okay," I said, waiting for the hook. "But we were talking about you at dinner the other night," she continued. "Your father mentioned he saw your name in an article, something about admission trends. He was surprised." Surprised, not proud. Surprised. "It is a major industry article." "Mom," I said, my voice flat. "Yes. Well," she rushed past it. "The point is, we were thinking, it has been a long time. Stella, Lauren thinks it is time to put things behind us. Sophie is applying to colleges this year. You know, she is looking at all the top schools." My hand tightened on the phone. Sophie, my niece. The last time I had seen her, she was 12 years old. A quiet kid with braces and big, watchful eyes. I had missed 5 years of her life. That is nice for Sophie, I said carefully. We thought maybe if you are ever back in Chicago, or if we come east, we could have dinner. My mother said, No drama, just family, but of course, you would have to be reasonable. Your father is still well. He has his principles. But if you showed him that you have made something of yourself, he might be willing to overlook the past. The audacity of it took my breath away. They weren't apologizing. They were offering me a conditional audition to re-enter their lives, provided I could prove I was no longer an embarrassment. They wanted to see if the family failure had been rehabilitated enough to be displayed on the mantle again. I am very busy, Mom, I said. I do not think I will be in Chicago anytime soon. Well, think about it, she said, her voice cooling instantly. Lauren says hello. She would call herself, but you know, priorities. Goodbye, Mom, I said, and ended the call. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence of my office. My heart was pounding, a slow, angry rhythm against my ribs. They still didn't get it. They thought I was climbing this ladder to get back to them. They didn't understand that I was climbing it to get above them. The door opened, and Malcolm walked in. He was carrying a stack of digital storage drives. Distribution time, he said, dropping the stack on my desk. We need to assign the regional read loads for the final review. Who do you want? I looked at the drives. We divided the country into territories. Usually, the director took the easy regions, the ones with fewer applications, to save time for administrative work. But I felt a sudden, perverse need to confront the ghosts. My mother's voice was still echoing in my ear. Sophie is applying to colleges this year. If Sophie was applying, her file would be in the Midwest pile. I reached out and put my hand on the drive labeled Region 3, Midwest/Great Lakes. I will take the Midwest, I said. Malcolm raised an eyebrow. You sure? That is a heavy load. Chicago, Detroit, Minneapolis, high volume of competitive privates, lots of politics. I know the territory, I said, my voice steady. I speak the language. All right, Malcolm said, shrugging. It is yours. Just don't burn out. We have 6 weeks until decision day. I won't burn out, I said. Malcolm left, closing the door behind him. I picked up the drive. It was small, cold, and heavy with digital lives. Somewhere in that data set was a file with the last name Whitaker. Somewhere in there was my sister's daughter. I plugged the drive into my computer. The screen flickered, and thousands of folders appeared. I told myself I was just doing my job. I told myself I was impartial. But as I stared at the list of names, I knew I was lying. I wasn't just an admissions officer anymore. I was a woman holding a flashlight, walking back into the dark basement of her childhood, waiting to see what was hiding in the corners. It was 11:35 on a Tuesday night in late January when the world stopped turning. The heating system in the admissions building had shut down for the night, leaving the air in my office stale and creeping toward freezing. The only light came from the glow of my dual monitors and the green standby light of the printer in the corner. I was the only one left on the floor. The rest of the team had gone home hours ago, their eyes bleeding from reading too many essays about how scoring the winning soccer goal changed my life. I was in the zone, that is what we called it, a fugue state where human beings cease to be people and become data points. I was moving through the Midwest queue with the rhythmic efficiency of a machine. Open file, scan transcript, check rigor of curriculum, glance at test scores, read the personal statement, flag for committee or send to the deny pile. Click, next, click, next. I had processed 40 files in 2 hours. My coffee was cold. My contacts were dry and scratching against my corneas. I told myself I would do one more, just one more, to round out the number. And then I would go home to my empty apartment and stare at the ceiling. I clicked the Next Applicant button. The screen refreshed. The name appeared in bold, sans serif letters at the top of the digital dossier. Whitaker, Sophie, High School, Lakeview Academy, Illinois. My hand froze on the mouse. It wasn't a figure of speech. My muscles actually locked, the tendons in my wrist seizing up as if I had touched a live wire. The hum of the refrigerator in the break room down the hall seemed to vanish. The traffic noise from the street outside was cut off. The only sound in the universe was the blood rushing in my ears. A whooshing, thumping roar that sounded like the ocean during a storm. Whitaker. It is a common name. There are thousands of Whitakers in the Midwest. But Lakeview Academy? That was the expensive private school 3 towns over from where I grew up, and the mother's information listed in the demographics section confirmed it. Parent/Guardian 1, Lauren Perry Whitaker. Occupation, senior partner, Sterling Crow. I stared at the screen. I had not seen my niece since she was 12 years old. In my memory, she was a blurry image of braces and awkward limbs, a quiet child who always looked at the floor when her mother spoke. Now, she was applicant number 89241. I should have closed the file. I should have stood up, walked to the door, and called Malcolm in the morning to recuse myself. That was the protocol. That was the ethical thing to do. I had written the conflict of interest policy myself, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I was paralyzed by a sick, voyeuristic curiosity. I wanted to see what they had built. I wanted to see the product of my sister's perfectionism. I scrolled down to the academic summary. It was terrified perfection. Class rank, 1 out of 312. GPA, 4.0 unweighted, 4.8 weighted. SAT, 1,580. A P, scholar with distinction. President of the debate club. Captain of the varsity tennis team. Founder of a non-profit called Coats for Chicago. It was a resume that screamed, I have never slept. It was a resume that had been curated, pruned, and polished since the child was in kindergarten. It was exactly what Lauren had been. It was exactly what I was supposed to have been before I failed. I felt a wave of nausea. It was so predictable. I could almost hear Lauren's voice in the bullet points. See, Stella? This is how you do it. This is what success looks like. I was about to close the file. I didn't want to read the essay. I knew what it would be. It would be a perfectly structured, emotionally hollow piece about leadership, or perhaps a calculated, humble brag about a time she overcame a minor obstacle, like a sprained ankle or a B+ in chemistry. It would be ghostwritten, or at least heavily edited, by a consultant who charged $500 an hour. But my finger slipped on the trackpad, and the window scrolled down. The personal statement appeared. The title was simple: The Ghost at the Table. I blinked. That didn't sound like a leadership essay. I started to read the first paragraph, and as I read, the air in the room didn't just feel cold. It felt vacuum-sealed. I was raised on a fairy tale, but it was not about princesses or dragons. It was a horror story about a woman named Stella. My aunt is the example of family failure. That is exactly what I was taught, word for word. Over the dinner table every Thanksgiving, I was told that she was weak. I was told that she cracked under pressure. I was told that she ran away to live in squalor because she did not have the spine to carry the weight of our family name. Her empty chair at the table was not a tragedy. It was a monument to what happens when you do not listen to your parents. My breath hitched in my throat. I pulled my hand away from the mouse as if it were burning. She was quoting them. She was quoting Lauren. I could hear the cadence of my sister's voice in the syntax. Family failure. The words I had heard 5 years ago were now staring back at me from a college application. I should have stopped. This was a violation. This was too personal. But I was hooked. I leaned in, my nose inches from the screen. For years, I believed it. Sophie wrote, I adjusted my life to avoid becoming Stella. I studied until my eyes burned because I was afraid that if I got an A-, I would catch the virus of mediocrity. I played tennis until my knees swelled because I did not want to be seen as soft. I became a perfect mirror. reflecting exactly what my mother wanted to see, because the alternative was to be erased. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and fast. I wiped it away angrily. This poor kid. They had done it to her, too. They had turned her into a soldier in a war she didn't choose. But then, the essay pivoted. But when I turned 16, I did something forbidden. I opened a private browser window, and I searched for her name. Stella Perry. I expected to find a mugshot. I expected to find a blog about how hard it is to be unemployed. I expected to find the disaster I had been promised. Instead, I found a book called The Scenic Route. I found articles in educational journals. I found videos of a woman standing on stages, telling auditoriums full of terrified students that it is okay to be lost. I watched my failed aunt speak with a confidence and a grace that my mother, successful, rich, powerful Lauren, never possessed. I saw a woman who wasn't broken. I saw a woman who was free. I gasped aloud. The sound was sharp in the empty office. She knew, all this time, while my mother was lying to me on the phone, while Lauren was sneering at my squalor. Sophie had been watching. I realized then that the story of the family failure was not a history lesson. The essay continued. It was a fence. My family did not lie about Stella because they were ashamed of her. They lied because they needed her to be a failure. If Stella was happy, if Stella was successful without their money and their approval, then the whole system fell apart. They needed her to be the cautionary tale so that I would stay in line. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the desk. This wasn't just an admissions essay. This was an indictment. It was a Molotov cocktail thrown through the window of the Perry family home. Sophie was deconstructing the entire psychological architecture of our family with the precision of a surgeon. She wasn't just saying, "I want to go to Arbor Gate." She was saying, "I see you. I see what you did." I read on, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. So I am applying to Arborgate not because it is the right school, or because it is where my grandfather wants me to go. I am applying because I know who the director of admissions review is. I am writing this essay to the one person who knows that the version of me on this paper, the grades, the scores, the awards, is a costume. I am done with the costume. I am done with the fear. I am writing this to say that I know the truth about merit. Merit is not doing what you are told. Merit is surviving the pressure to be someone else. I sat back in my chair, exhaling a breath I didn't know I had been holding. The room felt dizzying. This 17-year-old girl had just outmaneuvered everyone. She had written an essay that, if read by anyone else, would be seen as a powerful narrative about breaking free from family pressure. It would be an admit, a strong admit. But she knew it wouldn't be read by anyone else. She knew, somehow, that I would find it. She had lobbed this into the system like a message in a bottle, aiming it directly at me. I looked at the time. It was almost midnight. The shadows in the corners of the office seemed to stretch longer. I was about to close the file, to mark it as conflict of interest, and hand it to Malcolm in the morning with a shaking hand. I had to. I couldn't evaluate this. It was too raw. But then my eyes caught the final paragraph. It was separated from the rest of the text by a double space. It looked like an afterthought, or perhaps a whisper. And there is one more thing. Sophie wrote, "My mother and grandfather think that the night Stella left was a simple dispute. They think she walked out, but I have a memory of that night, too. I was 12, and I was sitting on the stairs, listening. I heard what Aunt Lauren whispered to grandfather before Stella even stood up. And more importantly, I found the email chain from that week. I know about the paperwork. I know about the withdrawal form that was signed 3 days before Thanksgiving. The blood drained from my face so fast it made me lightheaded. I have the screenshots. The essay concluded. They think the past is buried. But I am not my mother. I do not bury things. I keep them." I stared at the screen, the white light burning into my retinas. She wasn't just writing an essay. She was offering me a weapon, the paperwork, the withdrawal form. My mind flashed back to that night, the feeling of being ambushed, the sinking realization that my father had already contacted the dean. I had always assumed he had done it the next day. or maybe that night in a fit of rage, but Sophie was saying it was signed 3 days before. That meant they hadn't reacted to my decision. They had executed a premeditated eviction. They had cut my lifeline before I even knew I was drowning, and Sophie had the proof. The silence in the office was suddenly heavy, pregnant with a new, terrifying reality. My niece was not just a smart kid looking for a spot at a top university. She was a whistleblower inside the enemy camp. She was trapped in that house, in that life, holding onto a grenade, waiting for someone to help her pull the pin. I looked at the admit button. I looked at the deny button. Neither of them meant anything anymore. This wasn't about college. This was about a rescue mission. I reached for my phone. My hand was trembling, but my mind was ice cold. I didn't call Malcolm. I didn't call the dean. I took a screenshot of the essay. I saved it to a secure, encrypted drive that I kept for sensitive internal investigations. Then, I closed the file. I didn't mark it. I didn't rate it. I left it in the queue, floating in digital limbo. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark campus of Arbor Gate. The Gothic spires of the library were silhouetted against the moon. It was a fortress of knowledge, a place of high ideals, but down in the trenches, it was a knife fight. "Okay, Sophie," I whispered to the glass, my breath fogging the pain. "You have my attention." I grabbed my coat. I needed to get out of there. I needed fresh air, because for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel like the victim of the Perry family drama. I felt like the prosecutor, and the trial was about to begin. The next morning, the air in the admissions office was thick enough to choke on. I walked in at 7 o'clock sharp, carrying a cup of coffee that I had not taken a sip of, and went straight to Malcolm's office. I did not knock. I closed the door behind me and engaged the privacy lock. "We have a problem," I said. Malcolm Reyes was already at his desk, reviewing yield data from the early decision round. He looked up, his eyebrows knitting together as he took in my appearance. I had slept for maybe 2 hours. My blouse was crisp, but my eyes felt like they were lined with sandpaper. "Good morning to you too," Malcolm said slowly. "Is this a we ran out of financial aid budget problem, or a the dean is on a rampage problem?" "It is a Category 5 problem," I said. I sat down and slid a printed form across his desk. It was the standard conflict of interest declaration. Form 12B. I had filled it out in blue ink. My handwriting jagged but legible. Applicant name: Sophie Whitaker. Relationship to officer: niece. Nature of conflict: familial estrangement, personal bias. Malcolm picked up the paper. He read it once, then looked at me. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. "Whitaker," he said. "Midwest region. High stats. Lakeview Academy. You saw it?" I asked. "I saw that you spent 45 minutes on the file last night between 11:30 and 12:15, Malcolm said. "The system logs dwell time, Stella. You know that. You lingered on that file longer than any other applicant in the queue." "I did not touch the rating buttons," I said quickly. I did not add a comment. I did not move it to the committee stage. I just read it. And you need to read the essay," I said. "Now." I handed him the tablet I had brought with me. The file already open. Malcolm took it. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. I watched his face. I watched the way his eyes narrowed in the first paragraph, then widened in the second. I saw the moment he reached the part about the family failure. He stopped breathing for a second. When he finished, he set the tablet down on the desk with extreme care, as if it were an unexploded bomb. "Jesus, Stella," he whispered. "Is it an admit?" I asked. My voice was clinical, detached. I needed to keep this professional. "It is not just an admit," Malcolm said, leaning forward. "It is a manifesto. It is brilliant. The voice is distinct. The narrative arc is devastating. And the intellectual maturity is off the charts. If this came from a stranger, I would be flagging it for the provost's scholarship. But it didn't come from a stranger," I said. "It came from my sister's daughter. And she is using her application to blow up your family dynamic," Malcolm observed. He looked at me sharply. "This part about the withdrawal paperwork, the coercion, Is that true? I don't know, I said. I mean, I know I was pushed out, but I did not know there was a paper trail. Sophie says she has screenshots. Malcolm rubbed his chin. This is a fire starter, an incendiary device. If we admit her, people will say it is nepotism because she is your niece. If we deny her, and this essay leaks, which this kid seems smart enough to do, it looks like we are retaliating against a whistleblower who exposed a senior director's traumatic past. It is a lose-lose. That is why I am recusing myself, I said, tapping the form. I am handing the file to you. You run the evaluation. You make the call. I want nothing to do with it. Malcolm looked at the form, then back at me. His expression was grim. I will take it, but Stella, you need to watch your back. The logs show you opened it, in this climate, with the board looking for a reason to kill your detour pilot program. That 45 minutes of dwell time is enough to hang you. He was right. I knew he was right, but I thought I had ahead of it. I was wrong. By noon, the atmosphere in the office had shifted from tense to hostile. It is a specific kind of hostility found in academia, polite, smiling, and lethal. I was in the break room, refilling my water bottle. When Greg Henson walked in, Greg was an associate director who had been passed over for the job I now held. He was a man who believed that tradition was a moral virtue and that my holistic approach was a degradation of standards. Stella, he said, nodding. He was stirring sugar into his tea with a tiny wooden stick. Hectic day? Standard load, I said, screwing the cap back on my bottle. I bet, Greg said. He didn't look at me. He looked at the microwave. I heard a rumor that the Midwest pile is particularly interesting this year. Lots of personal connections surfacing. I froze. The water bottle was cold in my hand. We evaluate every file on its merits. Greg, I said. Of course, he said, turning to face me. His smile did not reach his eyes. But it must be hard to remain objective, especially when family is involved. I mean, if it were me, I would be worried about the optics. Even looking at the file could be construed as undue influence. He knew. Less than 12 hours after I opened the file, and 4 hours after I told Malcolm. Greg knew. I don't know what you are talking about, I said, and walked out. But my heart was hammering. The leak wasn't from the outside. It was internal. Someone was monitoring my activity logs. Someone was hunting for a slip-up. At 2 p.m, the hammer dropped. I received an email notification. It wasn't a standard Outlook ping. It was a high-priority alert from the Office of Internal Compliance and Integrity. Subject: Notice of Inquiry. Case number 44-902. My stomach dropped to the floor. I opened it. Dear Director Perry, this office has received an anonymous complaint regarding a potential violation of the Admissions Ethics Code. The complaint alleges that you have accessed and reviewed the confidential application materials of a direct relative, Sophie Whitaker, without immediate recusal, potentially with the intent to influence the outcome. Due to the sensitive nature of your position and the current scrutiny on admissions practices, we are opening a preliminary review. I stared at the screen. Anonymous. It wasn't anonymous. It was Greg. Or it was one of the other traditionalists who wanted me gone. They didn't care about Sophie. They didn't care about the integrity of the process. They saw an opening. They saw that I had hesitated, that fatal 45 minutes of staring at the screen, and they were using it to paint me as corrupt, if I went down for this. The detour pilot went down with me. The program that helped kids like Mateo and Anika would be scrapped as the pet project of a disgraced director. I grabbed my laptop and marched back to Malcolm's office. This time, I didn't care who saw me. They filed a complaint, I said, throwing the laptop onto his desk. Compliance. They are saying I tried to influence the file. Malcolm read the email. He let out a low curse. They moved fast, he said. This is a hit job. Stella, they were waiting for this. They probably have a script running on the server to flag any surname matches with staff. What do I do? I asked. I felt cornered. For the first time in years. The old panic. The feeling of being the family failure who couldn't handle the pressure started to claw at my throat. If I fight it, it looks like I am hiding something. If I resign, I admit guilt. You don't resign, Malcolm said firmly. He stood up and walked to the whiteboard on his wall. He picked up a red marker. We go nuclear. We go total transparency. The glasshouse strategy. What does that mean? It means we don't hide the file, Malcolm said. We don't review it in secret. We bring it to the full committee. The full committee was the Supreme Court of our admissions office. It was 20 people, regional officers, deans, faculty representatives, sitting around a table, debating the borderline cases, usually. A clear admit like Sophie wouldn't go there. She would be rubber-stamped by the regional reader. If we send a 1580 SAT score to the full committee, people will ask why, I said. We tell them why, Malcolm said. We tell them there is a conflict of interest and an internal allegation of bias. We tell them that to ensure absolute integrity, the director, you, will physically leave the building while the committee reads and votes on the file. We record the session. We invite the compliance officer to sit in the room. I looked at him. It was bold. It was dangerous. It stripped me of all control. If they read the essay, I said, they will know everything about my family. They will know I was the failure. They will know I was kicked out. Stella, Malcolm said softly. They will also know that you survived, and they will see that this girl is a star. Let the essay do the work. Don't fight Greg in the shadows. Drag him out into the light. I took a deep breath. Do it. Schedule the committee for Friday. Done, Malcolm said. I went back to my office, my adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. I felt like I was walking a tightrope over a pit of vipers. I sat down at my desk and tried to focus on a spreadsheet of financial aid distributions, but the numbers swam before my eyes. Then, my personal cell phone rang. It buzzed against the mahogany desktop, a harsh, intrusive sound. I looked at the screen. Mom. I didn't want to answer. I wanted to throw the phone out the window, but the persistence of the buzzing felt like a drill. I picked it up. I told you, Mom, I am busy. Stella, it wasn't the cool, detached voice from the other day. It was ragged, breathless. It sounded like she was calling from inside a closet. Mom? I sat up straighter. What is wrong? It is Lauren, she said. She is falling apart. Stella, I have never seen her like this. She is pacing the kitchen. She keeps saying she lost control of the narrative. Narrative? I asked. What narrative? She knows about the application, my mother whispered. She found a draft of the essay on Sophie's laptop. She knows Sophie wrote about you. Good, I said coldly. Maybe she should read it. She might learn something. No, you don't understand, my mother said, her voice rising in panic. Lauren is terrified. She says Sophie has access to old files, legal files. Stella, Lauren wants to talk to you, now. She is demanding I put you on the phone with her. I have nothing to say to Lauren, I said. She made her position clear 5 years ago. Stella, please, my mother begged. It was a sound I had never heard before. My mother, the Ice Queen, begging. She is talking about lawyers. She is talking about restraining orders to stop Sophie from sending that application. She is irrational. You have to calm her down. I can't stop Sophie, I said. The application is already submitted. It is in the system. It is done. Don't tell her that, my mother cried. If she knows it is already gone, she will— There was a scuffling sound on the line, like the phone was being grabbed. Then, silence. Hello? I said. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. My hand was shaking. Lauren wasn't just angry. She was desperate. Why? A college essay was embarrassing. Sure, but restraining orders? Lawyers? That was the reaction of someone who wasn't just protecting a reputation, but protecting a livelihood. What was in those files Sophie mentioned? Just then, my phone chimed again, a text message. It wasn't from my mother. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Area code 312, Chicago. I opened the message. There was no text, just an image. It was a screenshot of an email interface. The date stamp was November 22nd, 5 years ago, 3 days before Thanksgiving. From M. Perry Perry Holdings, Net, Martin Perry, to Dean, Miller Law, University, Edu, CC, Whitaker, Sterling Crow, Com. Subject, Paperwork, Withdrawal, Stella Perry. I zoomed in on the body of the email. The text was small, but legible. Dean Miller, thank you for your discretion. As discussed, please process the medical withdrawal immediately. We agree that Stella is not fit to continue the term. Regarding the tuition reimbursement, per our agreement with the board, we will convert the balance into a donation to the general fund to ensure the record reflects voluntary separation rather than academic dismissal. My daughter Lauren will handle the final signatures as my proxy. I stopped breathing. Academic dismissal. I hadn't been failing. My grades were fine. I was a B- plus student, but the email implied that I was on the brink of being kicked out, and that my father had bought a clean exit to save face. He had lied to the dean. He had painted me as mentally unstable, not fit to continue, to expedite the process. And Lauren will handle the final signatures. Lauren had signed my name. That was forgery. That was fraud. And if Lauren was a lawyer, which she was, and if she had forged documents to manipulate a university record that wasn't just a family secret, that was a disparable offense. That was a crime. I looked at the phone, the screen glowing in the dim light of my office. Sophie hadn't just sent me a screenshot. She had sent me the smoking gun. Lauren wasn't terrified because Sophie was calling me a failure. Lauren was terrified because Sophie had the evidence that could end her career. And now, that evidence was in my hand. I looked up at the door of my office. I felt the walls closing in, the compliance investigation, the angry sister, the desperate niece, the rival colleague. Okay, I whispered. You want a war? We will have a war. I picked up the landline on my desk and dialed Malcolm's extension. Change of plans, I said when he answered. Don't just schedule the committee. Call the university legal counsel. I need to report a crime. I did not wait for Lauren to call me. In a war, the person who strikes first controls the battlefield. I sat in my office, the door locked, the screenshot of the forged email glowing on my computer screen like a radioactive isotope. My hand hovered over the phone. I knew the number by heart. Even though I had deleted it from my contacts 5 years ago, it was a number I had once dialed when I scraped my knee, when I got my first period, when I had my heart broken for the first time. Now, it was the number of a stranger who shared my DNA. I dialed. The ringback tone was a sharp, electronic trill. 1 ring, 2, 3. Hello? Lauren's voice was tight, high-pitched. It wasn't the polished, boardroom contralto she used in her professional life. It was the voice of someone who had been staring at a wall for hours. It is Stella, I said. There was a silence on the other end so profound I could hear the static on the line. I imagined her in her gleaming kitchen with the marble countertops, gripping the phone, her knuckles white. Stella, she breathed. Mom said you hung up. I did, I said. But now I am calling back, because we need to talk about Sophie. I did not know, Lauren blurted out. The words came out in a rush, a frantic spill of denial. I swear to you, Stella, I did not know she applied to Arborgate. I thought she was only looking at the Ivies. If I had known she was sending a file to your office, I would have stopped her. I am not trying to use you. I am not trying to pull strings. Stop, I said. My voice was calm, which I knew would terrify her more than screaming. I am not talking about where she applied. I am talking about what she wrote. The essay, Lauren whispered. Mom said it was about you. Have you read it? Lauren? Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. No, she admitted finally, her voice small. Sophie, she locked the file. She wouldn't let me see it. She said it was personal. She said if I tried to read it, She would not apply to college at all. I thought I assumed she was writing about your situation, about how hard it was for us. My situation, I repeated, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Is that what you call it? My situation? You know what I mean, Lauren snapped, a flash of her old arrogance returning. Your breakdown. The fact that you left. I thought she was writing about resilience, about learning from mistakes. She was writing about mistakes, I said. But not mine. I took a breath. She wrote about the family failure. She quoted you, Lauren. She quoted the things you said at the dinner table. She wrote about how you used my name as a threat to keep her in line. She wrote that I wasn't a tragedy, but a prop in your stage play. That is ridiculous, Lauren said, but her voice wavered. She is a teenager. She is dramatic. She is twisting things. She also wrote about the paperwork, I said. The line went dead silent. What paperwork? Lauren asked. Her voice was suddenly very cold, very sharp. The lawyer had entered the room. The withdrawal paperwork, I said. The forms that were signed 3 days before I even told you I was leaving. The email Dad sent to Dean Miller, the email you were copied on, the email where you agreed to sign as his proxy. You are lying, Lauren hissed. You are making this up. You are trying to hurt me because you are jealous. I am looking at the screenshot. Lauren, I said. Sophie found it. She sent it to me. Date stamped November 22nd. Subject line. Paperwork, withdrawal. It discusses a voluntary separation to avoid academic dismissal. It discusses a donation to the general fund. It is all there. That is privileged communication, Lauren stammered. She hacked my email? That is illegal. I could have her arrested. She is your daughter, I shouted, losing my cool for the first time. Listen to yourself. You are talking about arresting your 17-year-old daughter to protect a lie you told 5 years ago. It wasn't a lie, Lauren screamed back. It was damage control. You were a mess, Stella. You were going to fail anyway. We accelerated the inevitable. We saved you the embarrassment of flunking out. We did it for you. You did it for the brand, I said. You did it so you wouldn't have to explain why a Perry couldn't hack it. And you used me. You used my failure to terrorize Sophie. You told her that if she stepped out of line, she would end up like me. Well, guess what? She wants to end up like me. She thinks I am the only sane person in this family. You don't know anything, Lauren sobbed. It was a shocking sound, a ragged, ugly gasping for air. You think you are so noble, running off to your little apartment, playing the martyr. You have no idea what it is like here. You have no idea what I have to carry. Then tell me, I said. Tell me what is so heavy that you had to forge my signature to keep it together. Everything, Lauren cried. The firm, the expectations. Dad is getting worse. He is obsessed with legacy. And Mark is... She trailed off. Mark was her husband, the perfect husband with the sweaters and the golf handicap. What about Mark? I asked. He is in trouble. Stella, Lauren whispered. Real trouble. Not, I missed a deadline trouble. Federal trouble. I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of trouble? He got involved with a consultant, Lauren said. Her voice was trembling so hard it was barely intelligible. A college admissions consultant. Someone who promised guarantees. For his clients' kids. For his partner's kids. He thought he was networking, but now the FBI is looking into it. There is a grand jury. Stella. If they find out, if they look at Sophie's application, if they see anything that looks like a side door, my blood ran cold. Is Sophie's application clean? I asked. Did Mark touch it? Did he pay anyone? No, Lauren insisted. I swear to God. Stella, Sophie did it all herself. She wouldn't let us near it. She hates Mark. She hates the whole system. That is why she wrote that essay. She wanted to blow it up. She wanted to make sure nobody could say she bought her way in. But if the feds look at her file, I said, thinking fast, and they see a connection to a school where her aunt is the director of admissions, and then they see a forged withdrawal record from 5 years ago involving her mother. They will connect the dots, Lauren finished, her voice dead. They will think it is a RICO case. They will think the whole family is a criminal enterprise. They will think I traded favors. They will disbar me. They will take the house. They will take Sophie. So that is why you are panicked, I said. Not because of me, not because of Sophie's feelings, but because you are afraid the house of cards is finally falling down. I am afraid for her, Lauren wailed. I am a bad mother, okay? Is that what you want to hear? I am a terrible, controlling, neurotic mother. I pushed her too hard because I was terrified she would be average, and now she hates me, and my husband is probably going to prison, and my sister holds the only piece of paper that can prove whether Sophie got in on merit or not. I sat in my office, listening to my sister weep. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. I looked at the photo of Sophie attached to her file. A serious girl with dark eyes that looked so much like mine. Lauren, I said, listen to me. The sobbing on the other end quieted to a whimper. I am not going to bury the essay, I said, and I am not going to reject her to save your reputation. What are you going to do? I am going to do my job, I said. I am going to put her file through the committee, the real committee, and I am going to recuse myself. I'm going to let her stand on her own 2 feet, something you never let her do. But the forgery, Lauren whispered. The email, if that comes out. That depends on you, I said. If Mark is going down, he is going down. You can't stop that. But if you want to save Sophie from the wreckage, you need to come clean, not to me, to her. You need to tell her the truth about what happened 5 years ago. You need to tell her that I didn't fail. You need to tell her that you pushed me. I can't, Lauren said. She will hate me. She already hates the lie. Lauren, I said, if you tell her the truth, she might just respect you for the first time in her life. There was a long silence. I could hear Lauren breathing, shaky, uneven breaths. And if I don't? She asked. If you don't, I said, my voice hardening, then I will. And if I have to tell her, I will show her everything, including the email where you agreed to sign my name. You wouldn't, Lauren said. Try me, I said. I am not the girl who ran away anymore. I am the director of admissions. I deal with liars every day. Don't make me treat you like one. I paused, letting the weight of the threat settle. Then I delivered the final blow. If you want to save Sophie, I said, if you want her to have a future that isn't poisoned by Mark's mess or your control, then let her go. Let her be admitted, or rejected, on her own terms. And for God's sake, Lauren this time, don't ask me to be the one who cleans up the blood. Don't make me dirty my hands to keep your conscience clean. I hung up the phone. I sat there for a long time, staring at the receiver. My hand was shaking, but my heart was steady. I had drawn a line in the sand. I had refused to play their game. But as I looked back at my computer screen, at the ominous email from internal compliance, I knew that the game wasn't over. I had silenced Lauren, but I still had a target on my back, and somewhere in the shadows of Arborgate, someone was sharpening a knife, waiting for me to make a mistake. I picked up the file again. Sophie's essay. The ghost at the table. Okay, ghost, I whispered. Let's see if we can bust you out. The campus of Arborgate University was vibrating with the specific, high-frequency anxiety of Invited Candidates Day. It was a Saturday in mid-February, and the quad was swarming with 17-year-olds in blazers that were slightly too big and parents who were trying too hard to look relaxed. They were all performing the same play, feigning casual interest while secretly calculating the odds of acceptance like heavily leveraged gamblers. I was not supposed to be there. Technically, as the director of admissions review, I should have been in the Great Hall, shaking hands and giving my standard speech about the holistic journey, but I had claimed a migraine. It was only half a lie. The pressure behind my eyes had been building since my phone call with Lauren, a dull, thumping rhythm that synced with my heartbeat. I was hiding in a small coffee shop on the edge of town called the Daily Grind. It was a place for graduate students and exhausted adjunct professors, dark and smelling of burnt espresso and old paper. I sat in a booth in the back, facing the door, nursing a black coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. I checked my watch. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. When the bell above the door chimed, I looked up. Sophie Whitaker walked in. I had not seen her in 5 years, but I would have known her anywhere. She did not look like the 12-year-old girl with braces I remembered. She looked like a terrifyingly refined miniature of my sister, but with the polish stripped away to reveal something sharper, harder. She wore a camel-colored coat and a simple black scarf. Her posture was impeccable, her spine a rod of steel, but her eyes, dark, deep-set, and ringed with shadows, held a weariness that belonged to a 40-year-old divorcee, not a high school senior. She scanned the room, ignoring the barista, and locked eyes with me instantly. There was no hesitation. She walked straight to my booth and slid into the seat opposite me. She did not say hello. She did not smile. She placed her hands on the table, clasping them together. I noticed that her cuticles were picked raw, the only sign of the nervousness she was suppressing. "You look like her," I said. It was not a compliment, and I think she knew that. "I know," Sophie said. Her voice was low, devoid of the bubbly cadence most teenagers affect. "It is useful camouflage." "Do you want anything?" I asked. "Coffee? Tea? A pastry?" "No," she said. "I want to know if I am in." I looked at her. "You know I cannot tell you that. Sophie, decisions do not go out for another 6 weeks. "I do not mean officially," she said, leaning forward slightly. "I mean, did you read it? Did you read the essay?" "Yes," I said. "I read it. And? And it is a suicide note," I said bluntly. "Academically speaking, you took a flamethrower to your own family history and mailed the ashes to the one person who could be hurt by it. Why?" Sophie looked down at her hands. She ran a thumb over her jagged cuticle. "Because I needed to make sure," she said softly. "Make sure of what?" "Make sure that I could never go back," she said. She looked up, and the intensity in her gaze made me flinch. "If I wrote a normal essay, if I wrote the leadership puff piece my mother wanted, I would get in. I know I would get in. And then I would go here, and I would study economics, and I would join the right clubs, and I would become her. I would become Lauren version 2.0. I needed to write something that would force a break. I needed to burn the bridge while I was standing on it." "You could have just applied somewhere else," I said. "No." Sophie shook her head. "They would have found me. They would have paid for it. They would have controlled it. I needed to come to you, because you are the only one who escaped." "I didn't escape, Sophie," I said, feeling the old bitterness rise. "I was exiled. There is a difference." "Is there?" she asked. She reached into her bag, a battered leather satchel that looked like it contained heavy books, and pulled out a manila envelope. "Because from where I am sitting, it looks like you were pushed, and I have the proof." She slid the envelope across the scratched wooden table. I hesitated. "Is this the email screenshot?" "That is part of it," she said. "But that is just the digital footprint. This is the physical evidence." I opened the envelope. Inside were 2 pieces of paper. The first was a photocopy of a document I recognized instantly. It was the university withdrawal form from 5 years ago. I stared at the signature line. Student signature, Stella Perry. The ink was black. The loops of the S and the P were perfect. Too perfect. My signature is messy. A hurried scrawl of a person always running late. This signature was precise, careful. It was Lauren's handwriting trying to be mine. "I found the original in a box in the attic," Sophie said. "My mother keeps everything. She calls it her insurance files. She thinks if she keeps the paper, she controls the truth." "She forged my name," I whispered. "I knew it. I suspected it when I saw the email. But seeing it—" "She practiced," Sophie said. I found a notepad with your name written on it 50 times. She sat at the kitchen island and practiced signing your name until she got it right. I was watching from the hallway. I looked up at my niece. You were 12? I was observant, she said, and I was scared. I didn't know what was happening, only that Aunt Stella was gone and everyone was angry, so I started paying attention. I put the withdrawal form down. My hands were shaking, just a little. This is a crime, Sophie, I said. If I take this to the authorities, your mother could lose her license. She could go to jail. I know, Sophie said. Her face didn't change. But that is not the worst part. What could be worse than forgery? Sophie reached out and tapped the second piece of paper in the envelope. It was folded in thirds, like a letter. This, she said. I found this in my father's briefcase 3 days ago. He was meeting with a consultant. I think he was planning to have this delivered to your office. I unfolded the second paper. It was a letter addressed to the office of the provost, Arbor Gate University. It was undated. It was anonymous. I began to read, and the blood drained from my face so fast that the room seemed to tilt. To the provost, I am writing to bring to your attention a matter of grave concern regarding the current director of admissions review, Ms. Stella Perry. It has come to my attention through private channels that Ms. Perry's departure from her previous legal studies was not merely due to academic struggle, but was the result of a negotiated settlement regarding a serious ethical breach involving the misappropriation of student funds and unstable behavior. While these records were sealed by her family's intervention to protect her reputation, it is alarming that a person with such a history is now the gatekeeper of your institution's integrity. I urge you to review her original withdrawal files. A concerned alumnus. I stopped reading. I couldn't breathe. It is a lie, I choked out. I never stole anything. I never misappropriated funds. I left because I hated it. I left because they forced me out. I know it is a lie, Sophie said, but look at the strategy. Aunt Stella, this letter wasn't mailed. My father had it. He was going to have it slipped into my admission file, or maybe sent directly to your boss. Why? I asked, my voice rising. Why would he destroy my career? I haven't done anything to him. Because of the investigation, Sophie said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Mom told you about the feds, right? About the consultant? I nodded. My father is terrified, Sophie explained. He knows the walls are closing in. He thinks that if the investigation expands, they will look at Arbor Gate. He thinks that if you are in charge, and you find out what he did, you will talk. You are the loose end. You are the family failure who has no loyalty to them. So he wants to discredit me. I realized. The horror of it was cold and absolute. He wants to plant a fake scandal about my past, so that if I ever try to testify against him, or if I try to expose their corruption, I will look like a bitter, unethical liar who was fired for cause. He wants to nuke your credibility, Sophie said, and he is using my application as the delivery vehicle. He wanted to create a situation where, if you admitted me, it would look like nepotism, and if you didn't, he would release this letter to blow you up anyway. I looked at the girl sitting across from me. She was 17 years old, and she was navigating a minefield that would have paralyzed a Navy SEAL. She wasn't just a victim of their ambition, she was collateral damage in their cover-up. Sophie, I said, sliding the papers back into the envelope. Does your mother know about this letter? I don't know, Sophie said. She knows about the forgery, but the letter? That feels like Dad. He is different lately. He is desperate. And you brought this to me, I said. Do you realize what you have done? You have handed me the weapon to destroy both of your parents. Sophie looked me in the eye. For a moment, the mask of adult composure slipped, and I saw the terrified child underneath. Her chin trembled. I didn't bring it to destroy them, she whispered. I brought it because I don't want to drown. I am drowning, Aunt Stella. I have been drowning for 5 years. I just want it to stop. I want the lying to stop. I don't care if I go to college. I don't care if I work at a grocery store. I just want to own my own life. I reached across the table. I wanted to take her hand, but I didn't. I sensed that she was holding herself together by a thread, and a touch might shatter her. You are not going to work at a grocery store, I said firmly, and you are not going to drown. I looked at the envelope. This was the second letter Malcolm and I had feared, but it was worse than we imagined. It wasn't just an accusation of bias. It was a fabrication of history designed to frame me as a criminal. If I did nothing, Mark might still send this. If I admitted Sophie, the concerned alumnus would emerge and say I was corrupt. There was only one way out. It was the path I had seen in my office. But now, looking at Sophie's exhausted face, the choice was solidified into iron. Sophie, I said, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You are going to leave this envelope with me. You are going to go back to the hotel. You are going to smile at your parents. You are going to say nothing. What are you going to do? She asked, fear flickering in her eyes. I am going to finish what I started at that dinner table 5 years ago, I said. I am going to stop running. I pulled out my wallet and placed a $10 bill on the table for the coffee neither of us had drunk. Your father thinks he is playing chess, I said, buttoning my coat. He thinks I am a pawn that can be knocked over with a scary letter, but he forgot one thing. What? Sophie asked. He forgot that I read files for a living, I said. I know how to spot a fake, and I know how to reject a bad narrative. I stood up. Go back to the hotel. Sophie, the committee meets on Friday. By the time the sun sets that day, you will be free. I promise you. Sophie looked up at me. But what about you? If you use this, if you fight them, they will come for you. Let them come, I said, and for the first time in 5 years, I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a woman who had finally found the match to light the fuse. I am the director of admissions. I decide who gets in, and I decide who gets kept out. I turned and walked out of the coffee shop. The envelope tucked securely inside my coat, pressed against my heart like a shield. The cold air of the campus hit me, but I didn't feel it. I felt only the heat of the evidence burning against my skin. Mark Whitaker wanted to question my ethics? Fine, I would show him exactly what my ethics looked like. They looked like the truth, and the truth was about to hurt. Monday morning arrived like a sentencing hearing. The sky over the campus was a flat, slate gray, the kind of weather that makes everything look like it is under interrogation. I walked into the administration building not through the front door, but through the side entrance that led directly to the Office of General Counsel and Internal Compliance. I was done playing defense. I sat in a glass-walled conference room with Malcolm Reyes and the Director of Compliance. A woman named Sarah Jenkins who had the warmth of a spreadsheet and eyes that missed nothing. On the table between us lay the anonymous letter Sophie had given me, the concerned alumnus accusation, and the digital logs from the weekend. We traced the IP address of the initial leak, Sarah said, sliding a folder across the polished mahogany. The email that tipped off the blog about your nepotism did not come from Illinois. It did not come from your brother-in-law. I frowned, leaning forward. Mark Whitaker has been paying consultants to dirty my name. It had to be him. Mark Whitaker is a client, Sarah corrected, her voice dry. He pays for outcomes. He does not get his hands dirty with the mechanics. The email came from a device registered to the university network. Specifically, it came from a burner phone that pinged off the tower directly above the admissions hall. I looked at Malcolm. His face was grim. It is inside the house, Malcolm said softly. We cross-referenced the timestamp of the leak with building access logs. Sarah continued. At the exact moment the concerned alumnus letter was drafted and the leak was sent to the press, only 3 people were in the secure wing. You, the janitorial staff, and Associate Director Greg Henson. Greg. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Greg Henson. The man who stirred his tea with a wooden stick and lamented the lowering of standards. I had thought he was just a conservative traditionalist. I had thought he was just jealous of my promotion. Why? I asked. Why go this far? Why fabricate a story about me stealing funds? That is libel. Because you are bad for business. Stella, Malcolm said. He stood up and paced the small room. Think about it. Your detour pilot program. You are letting in kids based on grit, not polish. You are telling the world that you don't need a $10,000 consultant to get into Arborgate. If you prove that the polished application is worthless, the entire industry collapses. The consultants lose their fees, and the people inside the system, the ones taking kickbacks to flag those polished applications, lose their revenue stream. It hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just personal, it was economic. Greg wasn't just protecting the brand, he was protecting a side hustle. He was the inside man for the very network Mark Whitaker was paying. So, I said, my voice steadying into a cold, hard rhythm. Mark pays the network to get Sophie in. The network uses Greg to facilitate, but when Sophie writes an essay that exposes the family trauma and potentially the fraud, Greg realizes I am a liability. He tries to nuke me with the concerned alumnus letter to get me fired before I can look too closely at the Midwest files. Exactly, Sarah said. And we have the emails to prove it. We intercepted a communication on the server this morning. Greg sent a status update to an external encrypted address. The subject line was, "The Perry Problem." I sat back, feeling a strange sense of clarity. For 5 years, I had thought my war was with my father and my sister. I thought I was fighting a family ghost. But I had walked right into a much larger machine. My family was just a cog in an industry that turned anxiety into profit. What do we do? I asked. We let him think he has won, Sarah said. For now, we need the final link. We need to prove the money trail between the external consultants and Greg. And for that, we need the client side. She looked at me. We need Mark Whitaker's receipts. I left the meeting and walked straight to my office. I had one call to make, but first, I had an appointment with a lawyer. I met him at a bistro off campus, a place where the noise level provided privacy. His name was David Thorne, a litigator from Hearth and Slate Legal. I had hired him on Sunday using my own savings. He was expensive, sharp, and entirely unconnected to the university. I handed him the photocopy of the withdrawal form Sophie had given me. Forgery, David said, inspecting the signature without even needing his reading glasses. And fraud. If this was used to secure a financial arrangement, that donation to the general fund your father mentioned, it is also wire fraud. I want to know my options, I said. You can file a criminal complaint, David said. Your sister would likely face disbarment. Your father would face fraud charges. The statute of limitations hasn't run out because the fraud is ongoing. It is still affecting your record. I don't want to put them in jail, I said, looking at the steam rising from my tea. I want them to stop. I want leverage. You have a nuclear warhead, David said. Use it. I went back to my car and sat in the driver's seat. I took out my phone. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call my father. I called Lauren. She answered on the first ring. Did you do it? She asked. Her voice was brittle, like dried leaves. Did you reject her? No, I said. And I'm not going to. Stella, please, she begged. The Fed's Mark is freaking out. He says if anyone looks at Sophie's file, they will see the connection. He says, Mark is lying to you. Lauren, I cut her off. What? Mark isn't just a client, I said. He is being blackmailed. The consultant he hired? They have a man inside my office, a man named Greg, and Greg is the one who wrote the letter accusing me of theft. Greg is the one trying to get me fired. I don't understand, Lauren stammered. Your husband paid a network that is now attacking your sister, I said. He fed them the information about my withdrawal 5 years ago. He gave them the ammo. Mark isn't protecting Sophie. He is protecting himself. And he is willing to burn me, and by extension, Sophie's admission chances, to do it. Silence on the line. He wouldn't, Lauren whispered. He promised me. He said he would handle it. Lauren, I said, my voice dropping. I have the withdrawal form, the one you signed. I have it in a legal file at Hearth and Slate. I can walk into a police station right now and end your career. I heard a sharp intake of breath. But I am not going to, I continued. Not yet, because I know you are trapped. I know you signed that form because Dad told you to. I know you have spent your whole life doing what you were told, just like I did until I left. I just wanted her to be safe. Lauren sobbed. I just wanted her to have the life I have. Look at your life. Lauren, I snapped. You are terrified. You are married to a crook. Your daughter hates you. Is that safety? I waited. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. 15. You have a choice, I said. Right now, today, you can protect Mark. You can keep quiet. Let Greg destroy me. Let the network win. And watch Sophie get rejected because her file is toxic, or you can help me save her. How? Lauren asked. Her voice was barely audible. I need the receipts, I said. I need the emails between Mark and the consultant. I need proof that he paid them. If I have that, I can take down Greg, I can clear the rot out of my department, and I can ensure Sophie gets a fair read. If I send them, Mark goes to prison, Lauren said. Mark is probably going to prison anyway, I said. The question is, do you go down with him? Does Sophie go down with him? He used us. Lauren, I said softly. He used my past against me. He used your fear against you. Are you going to let him use your daughter too? The line clicked. She hung up. I stared at the phone, feeling a hollow ache in my chest. I had pushed her, maybe too hard. Maybe the perfect Lauren Whitaker couldn't break the mold. Maybe the family failure was the only one who could ever really walk away. I drove back to the office. It was 4 o'clock. At 4:15, my secure work email pinged. Subject: Forward. Consulting agreement/invoice. 2024-A. I opened it. It was from Lauren's personal Gmail. There was no message. No, I'm sorry. No, good luck. Just an attachment. It was a PDF chain. Mark's correspondence with a firm called Pathfinder Prep. The promise of guaranteed placement. The mention of an internal contact at Arborgate. And the receipt. $25,000. Lauren had done it. She had chosen her daughter. She had burned her husband to save her child. I forwarded the file to Sarah in compliance. Got him, I whispered. The next 48 hours were a blur of controlled chaos. Sarah and Malcolm moved silently. They froze Greg's access. They seized his computer. They found the draft of the concerned alumnus letter on his hard drive. They found the bank transfers. Greg was escorted out of the building by campus security on Thursday morning. He didn't look smug anymore. He looked like a man who realized he had bet against the wrong sister. Friday arrived, the day of the full committee. I stood in the hallway outside the boardroom. Inside, 20 people were gathered around the long oak table. Malcolm sat at the head. A representative from the provost's office was there. I was not allowed in. I had formally recused myself. Malcolm came out for a moment. He looked tired but focused. We are going in, he said. The agenda is set. Sophie is the last file. Did you distribute the essay? I asked. Yes, Malcolm said, and I attached a cover sheet explaining the conflict, the investigation into Greg, and the fact that the concerned alumnus letter was a fabrication created by a corrupt employee to derail the process. And the forgery? I asked. The withdrawal? I didn't include the document, Malcolm said. That is family business. But I told the committee that the applicant's narrative regarding family pressure has been verified by internal findings. They know she is telling the truth. He put a hand on my shoulder. Go for a walk. Stella, this will take a while. I walked. I walked around the campus I had fought so hard to belong to. I walked past the library where students were studying for midterms. I walked past the dorms where they were sleeping. I thought about the thousands of invisible strings that pulled on these kids. The parents, the donors, the consultants, the lies. I thought about Sophie sitting in that coffee shop, offering me the weapon to destroy her family just so she could breathe. At 5:30, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Malcolm. "It is done. Come back." I walked back to the boardroom. The hallway was empty. The members were filing out. Some of them looked at me with curiosity, some with respect. One of them, a professor of English, gave me a small, solemn nod. I walked into the room. Malcolm was stacking files. "Well?" I asked. My voice was tight. Malcolm looked up. He didn't smile. This wasn't a smiling moment. "Unanimous," he said. 20-0. Admit." I let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my lungs for a decade. "And," Malcolm added, picking up a piece of paper, "the provost just signed this." He handed me a memo. "To Office of Federal Investigations. From Arborgate University, Office of the Provost. Request for formal investigation into external admissions consulting ring. We are handing over everything," Malcolm said. "Greg's files, Mark Whitaker's emails, the whole network. We are blowing the lid off." I looked at the paper. It was over. The secret machinery that had churned beneath the surface was broken. "What about Sophie?" I asked. "Does she know?" "Not yet," Malcolm said. "Decisions go out in 3 weeks, but she will get the big envelope." I walked to the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the quad. I thought about calling Lauren. I thought about calling my father, but I realized I didn't need to. The silence was better. My phone buzzed again. Another text. This one from Sophie. "Did I burn it down?" I smiled. I typed back, "No. You just cleared the land. Now you can build." I put the phone in my pocket. I was still the director. I still had thousands of files to read. But for the first time, the title didn't feel like a costume. It felt like a shield. And the family failure? She was gone. She had been replaced by the woman who just cleaned house. The explosion, when it finally happened, was not a singular event. It was a cascade. It started with a press release from the district attorney's office and ended with the shattering of a facade that had taken my family 30 years to build. The headline on the Chicago Tribune website was blunt. "Local attorney named in university admissions scandal. Mark Whitaker was not the mastermind." Of course, he was just a customer. But in the ecosystem of white-collar crime, the customers are the ones who make the headlines stick. The investigation revealed that the Pathfinder Prep Network had been bribing admissions officers at 3 different universities. Greg Henson, my former colleague, was indicted on 4 counts of fraud. He had been accepting payments to flag applications for special review, ensuring they bypassed the standard rigorous checks. But the real shockwave came from Lauren, in the old script. The Lauren I knew would have denied everything. She would have hired a phalanx of crisis PR managers. She would have stood by her husband, smiling tightly for the cameras, protecting the brand at all costs. But Lauren surprised me. She surprised everyone. 3 days after the news broke, Lauren voluntarily walked into the federal prosecutor's office. She was not a suspect. She hadn't signed the checks. But she was a witness. She handed over the emails. She handed over the bank records. She corroborated the timeline that proved Mark had acted without her initial knowledge. But she also admitted that she had hesitated to report him once she found out. It was professional suicide. Sterling Crow, her law firm, placed her on indefinite leave. Her social standing in the pristine suburbs of Chicago evaporated overnight. She was no longer the golden child. She was the wife of a crook and the sister of a whistleblower. But she did it. She testified. She did it to ensure that the investigation focused on the paid network, keeping Sophie's name clear of the wreckage. She traded her reputation for her daughter's future. A week later, she filed for divorce. While the legal world was burning, I had one final piece of business to attend to. I drove back to Illinois. I didn't tell them I was coming. I just drove, the tires of my car humming against the highway, carrying a briefcase that felt heavier than lead. I pulled into the driveway of the colonial house. It looked exactly the same as the night I had left it. The lawn was perfect. The windows were gleaming. It was a beautiful, hollow shell. I walked in. My parents were in the living room. They were sitting in the wingback chairs. staring at a television that was turned off. My father, Martin Perry, looked 10 years older. His skin was gray, his posture deflated. My mother, Evelyn, looked brittle, as if a strong wind would shatter her into dust. They looked up when I entered. There was no anger in their eyes anymore, just fear. "Stella," my mother breathed. I didn't sit down. I walked to the coffee table, the same table where they used to display Lauren's awards, and I opened my briefcase. I took out the photocopy of the withdrawal form, the one with my forged signature, the one dated 3 days before that fateful Thanksgiving. I placed it on the table. It sat there, a stark white rectangle against the dark wood. My father looked at it. He didn't touch it. He knew exactly what it was. "I know," I said. My voice was quiet. I didn't need to shout. The truth is loud enough on its own. "I know you didn't just let me leave. I know you pushed me. I know you negotiated my exit to save face before I even had the chance to struggle." My father closed his eyes. He let out a long, ragged sigh. "We thought you were going to crash," he said. His voice was a rasp. "The dean called me. He said you were missing classes. He said you seemed depressed. I couldn't watch you fail. Stella, I couldn't have people saying that a Perry couldn't handle the pressure. It was easier to make it a medical withdrawal. It was cleaner." "Cleaner for you," I said. "You didn't ask me. You didn't try to help me. You just erased me." "We wanted to protect the family," my mother whispered. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "We just wanted peace, Stella. We wanted everything to be smooth. We didn't want the neighbors talking." I looked at them. Two people who had spent their entire lives building a fortress of perception, terrified of the chaotic reality outside. "You wanted peace," I repeated. I looked at the forged paper, then back at my mother. "Peace for whom?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. "You sacrificed your daughter for your dignity," I said. "And in the end, you lost both. Lauren's life is in ashes because she tried to be the perfectionist you demanded. Mark is going to prison because he thought money could buy the success you idolized. And me? The failure?" I leaned in close. "I am the only one standing." I reached down and picked up the paper. I folded it. "I am not going to the police with this," I said. "Lauren has enough to deal with, but this—" I tapped the paper against my palm. "This is my receipt, and it means that from this day forward, you have no power over me. You have no say in my life. You have no say in Sophie's life. If you want to see us, if you want to know us, you do it on our terms. No more lies, no more control." I turned and walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. It clicked shut with a sound of finality that felt better than any scream. March arrived. Decision Day. At Arborgate, we call it the release. It is the moment when 50,000 emails go out simultaneously, changing the atmosphere in 50,000 homes. I was in my office, watching the server load. At 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, the batch was released. I waited. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a text message from Sophie. There was no picture, no confetti emoji, just text. I got the letter, the real one, the one that says, "Committee vote, unanimous." Mom told me. She told me everything. She told me about the forgery. She told me she stopped Dad from sending the second letter. She told me you saved me. Thank you for not fixing it for me. Thank you for not bending anything. I got in on merit. I can breathe now. I stared at the screen, smiling until my face hurt. She had done it. She had walked through the fire and come out holding her own future, but I wasn't done. 2 months later, at the end-of-year gala for the admissions department, I took the podium. The room was full of donors, alumni, and faculty. Lauren was there, standing in the back. She looked different. She was wearing a simple dress, her hair pulled back loosely. She looked tired, but she looked real. She had come at my invitation. "We talk a lot about success in this room," I said into the microphone. "We talk about the 4.0s, the valedictorians, the captains of industry, but we rarely talk about the other side. We rarely talk about the detours. The room went quiet. For a long time, I carried a label, I continued. I was called a family failure. I was told that because I stepped off the traditional path. I was broken. But in my work here, I have learned that the most interesting people are not the ones who never fail. They are the ones who fail, survive, and rewrite the story. I paused, looking directly at Lauren in the back of the room. Her eyes were locked on mine. That is why, today, I am announcing a new initiative, I said. Using the settlement funds from the fraud investigation, money recovered from the people who tried to buy prestige, ArborGate is establishing a new full-tuition scholarship. I took a deep breath. It is for students who have taken non-linear paths, for students who have gaps in their transcripts, for students who have had to restart their lives. It is called the Family Failure Fellowship. A ripple of shock went through the room, then a few chuckles, then applause. It wasn't polite applause, it was thunderous. It was the sound of people recognizing the truth. In the back of the room, Lauren put her hand over her mouth. I saw her shoulders shake. She was crying, but they weren't the tears of a woman who was losing face. They were the tears of a woman who finally understood. I hadn't used the name to hurt her. I had used it to heal us. I had taken the weapon that broke our family and turned it into a shield for someone else. Time moved on. Thanksgiving came again, but this year, nobody drove to the big colonial house in Illinois. This year, they came to Philadelphia. I hosted. My apartment was larger now. I had moved to a brownstone with a real dining room. But it was still imperfect. The chairs didn't match. The silverware wasn't silver. The turkey was slightly overcooked because I was busy laughing with Malcolm in the kitchen. Lauren came with Sophie. Mark was absent. He was serving the first year of a 3-year sentence in a minimum security facility. Lauren looked lighter. She was working as a paralegal at a legal aid clinic. Starting over from the bottom, she brought a bottle of wine, a cheap one, because that was what she could afford now. My parents came, too. They sat on my mismatched chairs, looking uncomfortable but present. My father didn't comment on the salary of a director. My mother didn't comment on the dust on the baseboards. They ate the food I cooked. They listened when Sophie talked about her first semester at ArborGate, about her classes in sociology and her job at the campus radio station. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The air was still fragile. There were silences that were hard to fill, but it was real. Nobody was performing. Nobody was pretending to be perfect. We were just a group of broken people eating dinner together, bound by the fragile, messy glue of forgiveness. When the night was over and the last dish was washed, I stood by the window looking out at the city street. The snow was falling, covering the grime of the sidewalk in a clean, white sheet. I thought about the journey, the anger, the revenge, the dossier. I walked over to the fireplace and picked up the black notebook, the one labeled The Truth, the one where I had documented every insult, every slight, every piece of evidence. I looked at it for a long moment. Then, I tossed it into the trash can. I didn't need it anymore. I knew who I was. The next morning, I was back at my desk at ArborGate. The new cycle had begun. The queue was full of thousands of new digital lives waiting to be read. I opened the first file. Name, Jackson Chen, GPA, 2.8. Suspension record. Yes, I could see the red flags immediately. Most admissions officers would have clicked deny in 10 seconds. But I paused. I opened the essay. It was messy. It had typos. But it started with a sentence that grabbed me by the throat. I am writing this from the library computer because we sold my laptop to pay for my brother's insulin. I read it twice. I felt that familiar spark, the recognition of a voice that was screaming to be heard through the static of the system. I smiled. I picked up my digital pen. I didn't care about the GPA. I didn't care about the suspension. I cared about the fight. I wrote in the comment box, clear and bold, strong admit, committee review recommended. The cycle continues, but this time, the gate is open. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Stella's journey resonated with you as much as it did with me. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a busy city like Philadelphia, a quiet suburb, or somewhere halfway across the world? Please let me know in the comments below. I read every single one, and if you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, hitting that like button, and smashing the hype button so this story can reach even more people who might need to hear it. Being a failure is just the first step to a better success. See you in the next story.